Welcome, everybody, to the Free State Podcast. I have a very special guest tonight that I'm very excited to have on, and I thank him for his time this evening. The wonderful Spike Cohen. Now we can call him International Man of Mystery because he made a foreign country's political party change. And that's kind of where I want you to start off. I know it was a couple weeks ago, but I want you to talk about your trip to Australia and how that all went down and how you got a political party to change to the Libertarian Party in Australia.
An entire political party. Yeah. Hey, Brian, thanks for having me on, man. It's great to see you. I last time we hung out was 2 years ago now, huh?
Just about 2 years ago.
Yeah,
Yep, I
that was fun.
drove you all around the state of Maryland and to DC.
In DC, yeah, we had a blast that weekend. So yeah, I was in Australia for the better part of 2 weeks back in end of June, beginning of July. So that was like a month ago. And yeah, while I was there, they decided to change. They were called the Liberal Democrats, which means something completely different pretty much everywhere else on Earth than it does in the US. So over there, the liberals refer to the small government people. And so there's already a liberal party, which is like their version of the Republican Party. They suck every bit as much as the Republicans do. And so they call themselves the Liberal Democrats. It's saying basically we're better, we're what the liberals claim to be. But they're all a bunch of libertarians. And so they changed their name to the Libertarian Party while I was there. Now, some haters and losers will say that this had been a decision that was many months in the making, and that my being there was somewhat helpful in getting the membership to sign up for it, but in no way was the ultimate deciding factor. You can completely disregard those opinions. It's very obvious that I am the reason that it happened. It happened while I was there. But I do want to say, when I was there, I did get some of the recalcitrant leadership to understand how important it was to rebrand as libertarian. Their concern was that everyone knew them as the Lib Dems or the Liberal Democrats. And well, if we change our name, they're going to wonder what that is. And I said, yeah, that's good. It's a blank slate. It's, we're now the Libertarian Party. Well, what's that? What's a libertarian? Oh, I'm glad you asked. Right. So I think it's going to be a great thing. They've already, because they have like members of parliament over there that are libertarian now. And so we've already gotten to see some of David Limbrick and John Ruddick and their other elected officials when they have spoken on the media. In the byline here where it says America's Jew for me, because that's what I've been elected to, it'll say, David Limbrick or John Ruddick, libertarian MP. And I just think that's so freaking cool. So
That's cool.
That happened while we were over there. And more importantly for me personally, I went over there to represent You Are the Power, my organization that I started last year. And I went there and talked with them about the work that we do and encouraged them to do similar work in their communities to kind of grow the liberty movement at the grassroots level. And they were so impressed by it that we are actually we're in the process of starting an Australian chapter of You Are the Power. It's going to be completely Australian. It's going to have Australian leadership. They're going to be the ones setting the different causes that they're working on. They're already putting together their membership lists and putting together their own budget, getting their registration to be a not-for-profit and all that. So yeah, and You Are the Power I am now truly an international Jew.
I like to say International Man of Mystery. That's what I like.
That's less anti-Semitic, yes.
Well, good. So, besides that major highlight, how was Australia? Have you ever been there before?
I had never been there before. It was freaking awesome. I was even dreading like the flight because it was a 19-hour flight from Dallas to Melbourne. It's just a straight shot, and we were dreading that. The flight was great. We land at 7 a.m. their time, which I don't even know what it was our time. We were so out of sorts after being on a plane all day. And we get off the plane where, we go through customs, we get picked up by the person who picks us up. And then we're driving to our hotel or being driven to our hotel. I'm already getting used to being on the wrong side of the road. And we look over on the shoulder and there's a bunch of freaking kangaroos hopping around, like how we'd see, like raccoons or deer or something like that. They're like pest animals over there. We pay to go to zoos to see kangaroos. They are sick of looking at kangaroos. So that kind of capped things off right from the beginning. It's like, oh, here's just a bunch of kangaroos hopping about. Every day was awesome. We had I headlined multiple events, spoke at 2 different parliaments. We had a state visit dinner at the president's room in Parliament in Sydney. Just insanity. Like it was Tasha and I were treated so well over there. We made so many connections over there. More than likely going to be back sooner than later. And yeah, we started a new chapter of the of You Are the Power in Australia, and I will go to my grave claiming that I am single-handedly responsible for them changing their name to the Libertarian Party, and no one can stop me.
And that's how I would expect it out of you. That's the story I'm going to go with too. That's the story I'm going to go with for sure.
That's the American version of the story. Is
exactly.
They weren't even libertarian in like belief until
they were completely off the spectrum of libertarianism.
A bunch of progressive liberals, and Spike went over there, and they're now a bunch of ANCAPs. That's the official story.
Radicalizing foreign nations. I love it. All right, so we have a couple Maryland stories I want to touch on with you, to kind of get your take on these things. The first one is something that I have very little knowledge of, and I imagine that you have knowledge of because you're a knowledgeable person. So right now, the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, is in talks, private talks, with the Baltimore Orioles stadium, Camden Yards.
Yes.
So I know that, taxpayers essentially subsidize these stadiums for their local teams. So I've a couple lines I want to read from this article. This is from the Baltimore Banner. It says, Governor Wes Moore promises we are going to get this deal done on Orioles Stadium. Reassurance comes in the wake of public officials questioning why negotiations have stretched so long. The state's top public official was out in Owings Mills on Monday, reliving college football memories, catching passes from Lamar Jackson, and sitting in a golf cart with Ravens owner Steve Biscotti. That seems like all he does is just go around places and take pictures. But as a big football fan, as Governor Moore is, he played receiver at Johns Hopkins. The future of baseball is in the bigger question. During appearance at Ravens training facility, Moore promised that the Baltimore Orioles will follow in the steps of the state's football team and secure their long-term future at Camden Yards. We are going to get this deal done. Moore released a public statement with Orioles owner John Angelos last month saying both sides were determined to make it happen, and Moore didn't go into specifics about what is holding up the deal, which Angelos had originally publicly speculated might be done at the All-Star break in July.
Yeah.
The current lease, which the Orioles declined an option on earlier this year, ends December 31st. So, teach me, I don't know. This is something that I've never looked into. I know it's a thing.
Yeah.
And so what is this deal? And this isn't just Maryland specific, right? This is nationwide. Yeah. With, public officials making these deals with these giant, essentially they're giant companies.
I know you're going to be shocked to hear this. It is a giant grift. That's literally what it is. It's a huge scam. So what they will say, and I will say, I don't know a lot more than just the specifics of, the governor's working on this deal with the Ravens and now with the Orioles to continue using Camden Yard in Baltimore. But generally speaking, what they will claim is, this isn't just about keeping our beloved sports teams here. There's a lot of money to be made. And, we'll get all these tax dollars and we'll be able to use it for, services that we need for the city and for the state and so forth. But any normally smart person would say, okay, but if you're saying that you've got to give them money, but then they're going to give us money, why not just let them keep their own money and we don't have to give them money? They could just give their, and the answer is because that's not true. It's not true that that the city or the state are going to get back as much as what they have given of taxpayer money. That's not going to happen. These things are giant loss leaders, especially with baseball. The profitability of these teams and these stadiums has been declining for years. With a handful of exceptions, they are losing money hand over fist with the stadiums themselves. They make a ton of money from merchandise and streaming deals and all and advertising deals and all that stuff. But the actual stadium itself usually is a loss leader. So what they do is they make you pay for it. and they emotionally manipulate you to do so. Oh, you're a Baltimore Orioles fan? You live in or around Baltimore and you want the Orioles to remain there? Well, I guess we got to pay up for it. Oh, you're a Ravens fan and you want the Ravens to stay in Baltimore? You live in or around Baltimore, you want it to be there? Well, I guess you're going to have to pay for it. And of course, we're going to wait until just a few weeks or a few months from the deadline of when it expires to strike some terrible deal that's going to screw you over. And we're going to leave you biting your fingernails, wondering if we're going to be able to make this deal work. And we're going to drop this really like vague wording about how we're determined to make this deal. If you're determined to make the deal, make the deal. The deal should be, here you go. You can use this stadium. There are all these different fees and things that you're going to have to pay, which are all just the price of operating a big stadium. And you're making a fortune, on all these other things. Your overhead is with the stadium itself, but you're making all this money with merchandising deals and advertising deals and streaming deals and all that stuff. You're making a ton of money everywhere else. You're just losing money at the box office, basically. Fine. Take it on the chin. That's your business. The taxpayer isn't going to pay for it. But unfortunately, enough municipalities have been getting away with doing this for so long that now they can just do it. And of course, it's like with anything else. The more powerful a crony corporate interest is, the more in bed they are with the local and state politicians. And so they just get better and better and better sweetheart deals. And so you get screwed. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to. And that's an excellent question. Would anyone miss the Ravens? Probably in and around Baltimore, yeah. But, we've seen teams move even after getting, for years, sometimes decades, getting carve-out after carve-out after carve-out after bailout after subsidy, and then another city offers a better one, and they go, great news, now we're the Utah Jazz, because that makes sense. And that's literally, yeah, it is. It's emotional blackmail. It's literally what it is.
So, I would imagine, and I don't know, I'm not a sports guy, so I don't know, but I'd imagine that especially the Baltimore Ravens, like the NFL team, they would have no problem either paying the rent and the upkeep on a stadium or buying the property and building a stadium and the upkeep and still make, crazy amounts of money. So like, why do you think this grift starts? Do you literally think it's just to tie in the local sports with the local government so that it's almost like the local government piggybacks off of the love of the team and they can look good by saying, oh, we struck a deal. Like you were saying, a grift. Do you think that it's all it comes down to?
Yes. Yeah. It's literally, here's the trade-off. You're the politician. I'm the sports team owner. And there might be a third party who owns the stadium as well. I don't know with Camden if it's privately owned or publicly owned, but in some cases, like with Madison Square Garden and a few other, there's also a private quote unquote owner of the property as well. So I don't know how that works with Camden, but let's just keep it simple. I'm the sports team owner. You're the politician. And one of us, we can start it with me, or it usually starts with the politician, but we'll start with me. I get a bunch of subsidies to basically cover all or most, sometimes even more than my costs with being here at this stadium, and the fact that I'm not going to get it back in ticket fees. I might even let the city have that, or the owner of the stadium, if there's one involved, have that. But I'm not going to have to pay anything for that, or I'm going to have to pay very little, or I even might get back some money for that. In exchange, I will probably give money to your reelection campaign, and I'll make a ton of essentially in-kind contributions by saying how great it is that Mayor Konkoski or Governor Konkoski, whatever, that, Mayor Bryan was able to get this, or Governor Bryan was able to make this work out so our beloved Orioles could stay right here in Baltimore where they belong. And you get to claim that all these jobs are being created, and that, which it's just the same jobs, and that, all this tax revenue is coming in, even though you spent more tax revenue to get the tax revenue you're getting back. And you get to, and more importantly, we both get to say our beloved Orioles get to stay right here where they belong and just keep losing. And that's
hey, they're doing pretty good this year.
Oh, are they? Okay, good.
They are.
That's been what I just said has been true for like 30 some odd years.
Yeah, you're right.
So
you're 100% right.
I'm glad that they're doing better now, which probably actually helps this deal, because people actually want the Orioles to stay there. So right. this is going to, it's literally, I scratch your back, you scratch my back, and we screw over the taxpayer and emotionally blackmail them. That's literally what it is. It is a giant grift. And it's, like most of these corporate crony grifts, it's at the expense of the taxpayer. They're the ones who get screwed over. I agree with this.
Let's start with State Senate first. All right, on to the next story. So this one is our lovely governor again, and he's been pretty his pocket's been pretty open this first 6 months in office. Yeah. We're already projected to be in a deficit in a couple years, so that's good.
Fantastic.
Absolutely fantastic. The link is not working right now. So the title of it is Westmore provides funding for protection from hate crime. And without even bringing up the article, I want to hear your opinion on hate crime and if, a non-violent crime is actually a crime. I know this answer, but I want to hear it out of your mouth and your thesis behind it.
So I'm going to give the most extreme example of a non-violent, victimless hate crime or hate speech that I can think of. I mean, there are definitely other ones, but this is one that comes to mind because this happened a couple months ago. And when it happened, a bunch of people were tagging me on social media and going, "Is this the kind of free speech you support?" And it was an example, and the example was out in front of a synagogue. I'm not sure if it was during actual Shabbat services or if it was just at some other time. A bunch of self-described Nazis showed up with Nazi flags and chanted a bunch of Nazi anti-Semitic stuff for, I don't know, an hour or two, something like that. And they're waving their flags and they're, saying whatever they were saying. And, I'm sure they were saying all sorts of horrific, terrible, and perfectly legal things. My understanding was they didn't make any actual identifiable threats of violence. They just said, a bunch of terrible stuff about Jews and a bunch of great stuff about, Nazis and Hitler and so forth. And I was asked over and over again, so I guess you think this should be legal and that these people shouldn't be arrested? Yes, that's correct. Yes, I believe that idiots with stupid opinions should be able to go out in public and make themselves known so that the rest of us know that they are in fact idiots with stupid opinions, and so that way we can safely avoid them in the future. The best way to deal with 6 Nazis that are, or 10, whatever it was, 10 Nazis waving flags, is with 20 non-Nazis with signs that point at them that say this person's a moron. Like, this is how you deal with this. And a lot of people that are watching this may say, yeah, but okay, fine, free speech, but there's not really anything redeemable about that. And okay, they can say it, but it's not like there's anything good coming from it. That's not what freedom of speech is for. Freedom of speech is for you to be able to say whatever you want to say, even if literally every other single person on the planet disagrees with you. That's the whole point of it. And if you have the opposite approach, if you say, no, you can't wave a Nazi flag, you can't say certain phrases, you can't deny the Holocaust, you can't say the Holocaust was good, which, I mean, you really should pick one of those. You can't say it both didn't happen and was good, but you can't say these things because they're harmful. Well, here's what really happens in practice. You've now taken something that if you put it out in the open, people hear you and go, well, that's yeah, exactly. I prefer to know who hates me too. You put, instead of having them out in the open with spotlights on them saying just some stupid stuff and having the rest of us go, wow, what a dumb, terrible thing to say. I'm glad to know who you are, so I'll never have anything to do with you again. Instead, you go, oh, no, you can't say that. That's forbidden. And if anyone even talks about it or mentions it or asks about it, you go, no, we can't ask about that. We can't say that. If someone goes, wait, I have questions about the Holocaust and exactly how many people got killed and what the timeline was. No, we can't talk about that. That's illegal because it's harmful. Well, okay, but I want to know, like, what is the Nazi ideology and what was their argument? Why did they say, oh, no, we can't talk about that? What does that sound like? It sounds like we're hiding the truth from people. It sounds like what happened when we asked about the vaccine or the lockdowns and we were called Nazis. and we were called bad things and told that our social media accounts would be canceled. Well, imagine if it went even further than that. Instead of threatening to zuck Brian for the 13th time, instead, imagine if it was you're going to go to jail and pay a fine. Do you know how many people are going to naturally think maybe they're right? I always heard they were terrible, but man, I'm not even allowed to talk about what they had to say. I go to jail if I even have a picture of Hitler and ask about him. This is a terrible way of dealing with things. You are actually driving people who think this stuff into the shadows where they can do far more harm, and you're making what they believe look like some kind of forbidden, hidden truth. I want these people to be out in the open and proud of what they're saying so the rest of us can hear it and go, well, that's the stupidest shit I ever heard in my life. And then maybe they do the same thing too. Have you ever smoked before? Like smoked cigarettes or anything like that?
Yeah, I do smoke, yeah.
Okay, so I don't know about you, but I started smoking cigarettes when I was like 12 or 13, like right before my 13th birthday. And when I turned 18, I remember the first time I went in the store and it was so cool. I just showed them my ID and I got my pack of cigarettes for I quit smoking like a year and a half later because it was like, oh, well, that was anticlimactic.
Right.
Like this thing that I did that was cool. And I'd get someone to buy me a carton of cigarettes. And I would, I found this place. They used to have cigarette vending machines. I was the last generation of kids that had, and you'd be in the hallway when people weren't there and you'd grab a pack and it was like $1 more. But man, you didn't have to show your ID and run out and you go like all of that stuff, right? I was the coolest kid on earth. And then like, I'm like 18 and 3 weeks old and I'm smoking and going, man, this sucks. I don't even like this. Now, and very shortly after, I ended up quitting. And I think that there's probably a lot of people who think that they're in some kind of like, cool hidden thing. If we were just like, yeah, okay, tell me your opinion. Oh, yeah. Wow, really? All right, that didn't make much sense. What about this? What about that? Okay, but that doesn't even line up with this. Okay, but you said this, but then you said that. The Holocaust didn't happen, but you're also glad it happened. Which is it? Like, maybe it'll make them go, oh, maybe this is stupid, right? Like, and if not, okay, great. I know you're a Nazi and I don't want to be around you. Now that's an extreme example. You could use, Nazi Holocaust apologists. You could use, racist slavery apologists. You could use whatever. You could use any example that you want to give, some kind of extreme. You could talk a trans extremist who believes that it should be illegal to be straight and, and have children that you tell them what their gender is instead of letting their kindergarten teacher decide it. Like you could, whatever you want it to be, you could come up with some extreme example and they have the right to that opinion. And if you let them say it aloud, you get to see how stupid it is.
Yeah, so we actually had that happen kind of on the trans thing with the teacher thing. Cause it's a hot topic. My wife's a teacher and they don't go near that stuff. They're not supposed to. So when teachers are talking about this, they're really not doing what they're supposed to.
No, and that I agree with because that's their actual job is to teach children. I'm just talking about people giving their opinion in general, not necessarily what you're teaching children. That there should be guidelines of what you're teaching children. I'm talking about people just sharing their opinion in general.
But there was a teacher at a local high school, and they were trans. They were male to female trans. Okay. And they, which as whatever, like they had like a safe space, right, for gay and trans and other LGBTQ groups, a safe space, right, in their classroom. Yeah. But it came to light that there was more than just kids going in there for like a safe space. It was making out and they think of it, and the teacher was allowing this to happen. Yeah. So it comes to the point where it's like, okay, what somebody who might be extremely conservative, they could see that almost as a hate crime because you're facilitating homosexual desires, whatever you want to call it. So it can go both ways. And I actually brought up the article finally, and the fun part about this is that the left, who Westmore is part of, I would consider the far left for the most part, right?
Okay.
His funding, which was $6.3 million, as he said, to protect against hate crimes, is actually to enhance local police recruitment and retention efforts throughout the state. So the far left wants more policing based off of hate crimes, not actual violent crimes. This isn't 6.3 million for Baltimore City so they can get, a little bit more police officers. They're short 300 police officers according to their numbers. Where people are actually, getting murdered every day. And now that they're calling, these gang shootings or these shootings in inner cities, they're finally starting to call them, mass shootings, which, if you're going to follow the definition, it's got to be across the board, right? It's 4 or 5 more people injured, during a shooting. And so you have Westmore, far left. He's a hoot. You should, if you haven't really looked into him, he's something else. He's like Hollywood trained and all this stuff, for speaking. But yeah, $6.3 million to not fund against hate crimes. It's to fund the police. He's giving $6.3 million to police. It's exactly what it is. Yeah. And
to protect from hate from the $6.3 million worth of hate crimes that are happening in Maryland.
Right. Yeah. Where black on black crime is rampant, and that's the majority of the crime, unfortunately, but it is. Yep. And, and it even, this article broke it down, and this is what I get for not using archive.is to go off. That's what happened. But it's mostly going to counties that don't really need it. Baltimore City is getting a good chunk of it, almost a million. Almost just $1 million, though. Yeah. A far left county is getting the most of it. Montgomery County, which happens to be the richest county in Maryland, is getting the majority of it, followed by Baltimore City. So that it lines up perfectly, right?
Yes, and this is because, as we know, the wealthy people living in freaking Montgomery County, Maryland, just lousy with hate crimes. It's a terrible, terrible thing, and they need the police to do something about. It's all nonsense, man. Do you know what it is? Is the police have figured out a new way to get funded, because the police always have to protect, at this federal level, you have to protect the military industrial complex. At the local and state level, you have to protect the police and prison industrial complex and the educational industrial complex. And I guess to increasingly the medical industrial complex and the welfare industrial complex as well. But you have to protect the police and prison industrial complex. You have to give them more and more and more and more and more. And the thing is, with this, BS so-called defund the police movement, which is really the keep the police's funding this high or higher, but also fund all this other stuff that has nothing to do with public safety movement. They're now having to come up with a more creative way to give more money to cops. Not accountability, just money. And so what they'll say is, well, this is for hate crimes, or this is for gun violence, or this is for, I'm sure they'll soon be saying climate change. Like it's what during COVID, they said it was for COVID. Oh, we got to make sure we're enforcing COVID. Like it's whatever hot button thing they can convince the majority of people that this money is needed for. Down south, they're doing it, to protect us from the drag shows. Like, it's like, no, you're just say you're giving money to the police because they demand more money and they're one of the strongest lobbies in your state. Just admit it. Stop. It's, again, emotional blackmail. What is it you're scared of? What is it that you hate? Okay, that's the reason we're giving money to the cops. Like, it's a lie. It's not real. And so, it bears out in that more money is going to like places that have no hate speech or hate crimes to speak of than to other places where it would be happening. But the reality is, this is how government works. The problem, Brian, is that government has a perverse incentive for things to get worse, because that's how they get more money, is by convincing you that they need more money because the problem's getting worse. Well, because if the problem was getting better at X amount of funding, whether or not it was because of what they were spending money on, the logical conclusion is, okay, well, if the problem was this bad with this much funding, well, now the problem's this bad. maybe we can bring the funding down to here, or at the very least, not increase it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe reduce it down to here, or maybe it needs to stay here because that's what keeps it low. But if it keeps dropping, eventually we go, all right, well, I guess this can drop too. We don't need this anymore. But if the problem keeps getting worse and worse and worse, well, then the funding's got to match it too, right? So you literally, unlike any other organization, well, actually, so charities have a similar thing. If a charity is working on something and the problem starts getting better, well, maybe that charity doesn't need to exist anymore, or maybe it can focus on something else, or maybe it just doesn't need as much funding. But the difference is, A, the charity is voluntary to give to, so you can say, okay, well, it seems like the problem's solved here. And B, the charity could just shut down or restructure and say, oh, well, we've dealt with that. Now we have this new issue. But the problem is the government's a jobs program and a protection racket. They need more money. They need more funding. They need more power. They need more public sector jobs. They need all of that. It has to continue growing endlessly. It's like a zombie. It's like a zombie chia pet. It has to just keep getting bigger forever. And so you got to give it more money, more power, more authority, more power over how you live your life and everything else. It has to just keep getting bigger and choking off everything else. And so the only way to try to logically explain why that should happen is for the problems to get worse. Now, the crazy thing about that is anyone with common sense looks at this and goes, well, the more money we give you, the worse it gets. So what do we need you for? And that's why voices like that get stomped out with a passion.
Well, that's like, I guess, I mean, it's pretty, if you listen to other like podcasters and stuff kind of in our circle, it's pretty well known that, the person in charge of the homeless division or whatever you would call it, in Los Angeles makes an exorbitant amount of money. It's, it's $300,000 a year or something like that. And the problem is, progressively getting worse in LA. And we have this more local known kind of example of that is our superintendent of Baltimore City Schools, which I think is one of the worst public schools systems in the country and the most expensive per student.
One of the worst in the developed world.
Yes. Holy shit. I didn't know developed. That's bad.
No,
that's
bad. It's bad.
Their superintendent makes $275,000 a year. And she was around for, I think, 2 years, and she bounced or she was fired or whatever it was. And they hired a new person and upped, the cost per student, a few $1,000s, no big deal. Keep throwing money at it. It'll just keep fixing it. Right. So the same kind of example.
Yep. The Baltimore City schools, either Baltimore City or Baltimore County schools. I forget which, but I believe it's Baltimore City schools have they're in the top either 10-ish or 15% percentile of funding of any per student of any school system on earth. And the worst among the worst measurable outcomes, graduation rates, literacy rates, math proficiency rates, anything that they use to measure, universally measure student outcomes, among the worst on the planet. So like one of the best funded, one of the worst results. That's government schooling in a nutshell. Baltimore, one of the worst examples, or I guess best examples, but that's government schooling in a nutshell.
And Scott, because Scott is usually my other host. That's who's not here. That's why.
Okay.
So he's kind of from afar. He's asking questions.
He's helping. Good job.
He is helping me. He says they claim they need to pay that much money to attract talent, and it's true. The same thing happened with the chief of police. Here he goes. See, this is why I have Scott on my show. The chief of police did the same thing, right? And the murder rate in Baltimore City has not gotten any better since this new. Well, he's not there anymore, but police chief came from New Orleans, and he, quote unquote, kind of turned New Orleans around, and apparently he was appointed by the feds as the next person to take over Baltimore City Police. He resigned. I think it's Scott. You can correct me if you'd like, but I think he was around for either 2 or 4 years. I can't remember which. And his contract's not up for another like 2 or 4 years. Yeah. And he's making a pretty penny, and he resigned, but the city is keeping him on as a consultant making the same pay as he was as acting like the police chief. He's making the same amount of
Yes.
money because they didn't want to break that contract with him. He doesn't even live in the state. The day he resigned, he was back at his actual home with his family. There were speculations that he didn't even own a home in or around Baltimore City, that he was kind of just seeing this as a trying to pad his resume kind of situation, or maybe,
Yeah.
lead him to a nice early retirement.
Yep. Yep.
And
Yep.
now I don't even think Baltimore City has an actual police chief. I think they just have an acting police
Incredible.
chief.
Incredible. I read an article. It was actually an essay or a story that was written by agreed. Yeah, no, it's very distracting. It's very distracting. The GQ thing is killing me. But I read a thing that was written by a former Baltimore City teacher. He was one of these people who came from out of town, and he was white knighting Baltimore. He was going to come in and he was going to teach these kids. He was going to be like Edward James almost, in that, or Michelle Pfeiffer. He's going to reach these kids, and so he goes and shout out to anyone who gets that reference. But he goes in and realizes very quickly that there's no hope. Like, the school system is so broken. There is no order for the children. They are basically, teachers are, their hands are tied in what they can and can't do. And increasingly, for the most part, a lot of the parents aren't even really that engaged. They also were educated very poorly, so they don't even know the difference between bad education and good education. And it was basically just trying to make sure they didn't kill each other, which they could usually do that. And he said the teachers were all essentially alcoholics. They would get blind drunk every weekend and try to forget everything they had gone through the previous week. And it was very depressing. And he did it for, I think, I want to say he did an entire school season and then had to give up. Like, he just couldn't. It was too much. And he said, there's this terrible churn rate, because even if you are paid well, it's a terrible schooling system. Well, I got news for y'all. There's no amount of money that's going to fix that. Like, it's not like, oh, we'll pay you $300,000. Okay, great. I'll make $300,000. That'll make me quit even sooner, because that means that I only have to do this one school year, and then I can go somewhere else and I'll have a good bit of money. Like, nothing's going to fix that problem, right? So what's going to fix this is realizing that, at least in Baltimore, really around the world, but at least in Baltimore, government is a uniquely bad way of handling this. And so they need to get market-based education involved. They need to identify the students that are really trying to do better and get them the hell out of these schools first priority, and then pull out kids as they can. For anyone whose parents want to be involved in their education, maybe some of them, their parents couldn't care less and they couldn't care less, and there's not much you can do for them. I still think that you could do a lot better with just a free market approach to education and private schooling and charter schooling and so forth. But at the very least, get the ones that are trying out of this hellscape environment, so you can have some people that can actually do better. And it's going to take that. This is not a money problem. It is a structural problem. And it's been going on for so long that now you have parents and grandparents who have been raised in this terrible system, who are raising their kids, who are raising their kids. And it's bad on top of bad on top of bad. And you think the millions of people who have been completely failed, and that manifests in their lower quality of life, their higher rates of violent crime, their almost total inability to be able to escape generational poverty. I mean, these people have been screwed. And it's weird because they recognize that something's wrong, but they don't even necessarily know just how bad it is. And the solution is literally to get government out of it. Take that money and put it into free market schooling. Let the parents who are trying to get their kids out of it, let them have top priority to get their kids into better schools, and eventually work it down to where everyone can do this, and get government the hell out of it. And let schools create their own accountability standards, so that the teachers aren't sitting there with their hands tied and the poor performers are just rewarded with a salary, and they just shut down emotionally and aren't even teaching the kids anymore. This is not going to be fixed by government. It's going to be fixed by getting government out of it.
Well, yeah, and a little inside baseball with Baltimore City schools. my wife being a public school teacher in Maryland, she kind of hears. And the majority of teachers in Baltimore City are not, I know, government certifications don't mean anything, but really they are private organizations that certify teachers. Besides the point, the majority of teachers in Baltimore City aren't actual teachers. They take a class, they pass a test, boom, you're a teacher in Baltimore City. Yeah. And that means they don't have to pay them as much either. Yeah. So there's that monetary incentive to do a good job is not there for Baltimore City schools. And one last thing before we change topics, because this is always a huge conversation in Maryland, especially Baltimore City, obviously, about the amount of funding that Baltimore City schools get, and the not that kids are a product, but the product they get out of the schools. And this is a article, I quickly looked it up. I know there's other ones that are a little bit more recent, but this was from last year. 77% of students at a particular high school in Baltimore City tested at elementary levels. And just a quick glance while you were talking, it was 71 of those students out of 628, 71 of these high school students were reading at a kindergarten level, 88 students reading at a first grade level, another 45 are reading at a second grade level, just 12 students passed the Patterson High School, students tested at Patterson High School were reading at grade level, which comes out to 1.9%. So out of all, let's take that as an average. We have 2% of the student population in Baltimore City is actually at least trying, right? Either trying or succeeding. Like you were saying, why not take this 2% and go somewhere where you can actually learn, right? You obviously want to learn, whether it be the difficulties that you face of getting to school, your home life, all of this, and you're still at least on par with where you should be. Let's pull you out, whether it's to a better public school, quote unquote, or just some other sort of program, right? We as anarchists, we like to talk about kind of going full bore right away. But when I was running for office last year, I recognized that doesn't compute with most people. So you got to look at it.
And we're nowhere near them.
No,
we're nowhere near that either. Here's the scenario I like to use. So let's picture that there's someone who is, they're suspended like 30, 40 feet from the ground. And they're tied up by a bunch of ropes. And they're like, help me, help me, help me. And if you go, well, the ideal would be for them to be right here on the ground and not tied up. And so you cut all the rope at once and they fall to the ground and die. And you go, oh, well, but ideally they would have been down here anyway. So this isn't my fault. Or let's say you go, oh, well, I'll just, there's not really any order in which I need to do this. I'm just going to cut here and cut here. And so you cut the bottom ones and they end up swinging from their neck and now they've been hanged and they're dead. Or you can realize that there's a series of steps of lowering them down with these ropes and then getting them to a point where you can start cutting the ropes and they can, when they land, they're landing on their feet, or on their knees or whatever, so they're not falling, and now you've set them free. I think we need to look at government this way. And I say this as someone that I am a Rothbard button pushing abolitionist. If I had the ability to snap my fingers and make all government go away, I absolutely would. And yes, there would be some negative externalities and negative trade-offs from that, but we'd be where we needed to be moving forward. But that's not real. There is no Rothbard button. I have no magic Jew powers to make government go away yet. But what we do have is we know what can be done, a series of serious incremental steps that can be done to get us from the status quo of where we are and start de-escalating down to something resembling freedom. And it's going to take that, not just because there are all these systems in the way, but because you have to get public opinion on your side too. And you're not going to get it on your side by going, you can say that. I'm not saying not to say it. You can tell people, listen, the problem is government. Ideally, we need to get government out of the way. But if you're actually in office, you're not just the one spouting off. You're the one actually looking at how to do this. And you have this funding going in. The first step is you go, hey, look, okay, this money is coming in. We need to assign the money to the students so that the parents who actually want to make this choice can choose to send their kids to another school. And we're going to stop negotiating with the teachers unions. And we're going to start having some accountability standards. And we're start going to increasing the testing standards, because if the school students are even going to school, then they need to be taught by people who actually know what they're doing. And if we can't reach enough people who are who can actually properly school these kids, well, then we reach out to the market and say, listen, here's a bunch of money for more schools. We don't have the people here to be able to do this, so we need you to come in and help with this stuff. Here's some money for it. And that's a major de-escalation from the status quo to a more free style of a more free market style of schooling that doesn't have government involved. It's going to take stuff like that to end it. Imagine being someone who lives in Baltimore and goes through just the last time I was in downtown Baltimore, it was to go to Johns Hopkins to see a MS specialist because I have multiple sclerosis. Actually, no, the last time I was in Baltimore was with you. So that's not true. But the last time before that was a few years before that, and I went to Johns Hopkins. And when you go to Johns Hopkins, you drive through some of the worst parts of Baltimore on the way to one of the nicest hospitals on the planet.
It is in one of the worst parts of Baltimore.
It's the hospital weird. It's like it would be like putting the Mayo Clinic in I don't know,
East
Caracas, Venezuela, or Mogadishu, Somalia, or something like that. Like it's like putting it in a war, like Fallujah, Iraq, or something like that. Right. Putting it in a war zone,
mid-conflict.
But when mid-conflict, when the invasion starts. And so I'm going there and I'm thinking I'm looking at just, people walking around and I'm thinking imagine this is what you wake up to. I am so happy to leave here. Imagine if this is all you know. Now imagine being in that situation and you still go to school so you can be at least average level of proficiency. That's someone who is either a super genius or just incredibly driven to do better, or both. That should be the absolute top priority, to get kids like that into an actually good schooling situation, because those are the kids that are not only going to be able to pull themselves and their parents out of poverty, they're probably going to be able to pull entire neighborhoods out of poverty with the solutions they have. So that means it needs to be coupled with getting rid of the taxes and the occupational licensing and the zoning laws and all the stuff they get in the way of them doing it there. Because what happens? They get very successful and they go, well, this isn't a place to try to put down my roots and make money. But it used to be. Mm-hmm. When my dad's side of the family came here, they were set up in Boston. They were, penniless migrants who got here, and they built themselves up financially. People used to come to New York and Baltimore and Los Angeles and all these cities, and they build themselves up financially. Well, that doesn't exist anymore because the government is so in the way that they actually force people into poverty. So we just need to get government out of the way as much as possible. And it starts with showing people that the problem is government. The problem is human beings telling other human beings, you're not going to be allowed to thrive unless you pay me off first. That's called a protection racket. And that doesn't help anyone.
Right. Scott, my usual co-host, says, which would be better for the children? Baltimore Public Schools or My Little Pony?
Unironically, My Little Pony. Unironically. And I say that I'm not a brony. I've never been a brony. I'm not sure why people think I'm a brony. But I think even as because I changed my name to a My Little Pony character, but I was 3. I was 3 years old. You're not I was a toddler. I wasn't a brony. Anyway, and then the name stuck. It's not my fault. But unironically, yes. I think that just about anything would be better than public schooling in Baltimore. It would literally Magic the Gathering, name a thing, name Pokemon. Just getting them together and teaching them how to play Pokemon would probably be better than Baltimore public schooling. They might be good at Pokemon. They could go into tournaments and make some money or something. I teaching them poker and hoping that some of them make it to the World Series of Poker. Just about anything would be better than Baltimore public schooling.
Right. You only have to win poker once and your life has changed.
You're good for life. You could get you could pull your whole family out of poverty.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Change up directions a little bit. So this is new news. I'm sure you've heard about it. But it just came out today. I saw it on Twitter, X, this afternoon. And it's Supreme Court allows ATF to enforce quote unquote ghost gun rules for now.
Yeah.
So, quick little blurb about, in case you haven't heard, the Supreme Court on Tuesday paused a lower court decision that invalidated the Biden administration's effort to regulate so-called ghost guns, allowing enforcement of the restrictions while legal proceedings continue. So what this was, if you don't know, essentially at one point the Biden administration said 80% lowers, especially the P80 kits, 3D printed weapon or firearms are illegal, right? If it's not serialized, then it's illegal. So lower court struck that down and said, no, that's unconstitutional. Serialization has nothing to do with your ability to possess a firearm, right? And so that just got reversed today. So I just want to hear your, as resident ATF troll master, I just want to hear your take on this.
Well, so first of all, I don't know the reasoning behind their decision to say no while it's being. We're going to undo the stay while it's being adjudicated. So I'll defer on that. Usually, the Supreme Court is loath to try to enforce stuff before a decision is made. So it could be just as simple as that, or there may be a specific like case law or provision that they're pointing to saying no, in this kind of circumstance, you would need to allow it to continue to be enforced until it's being decided or whatever. Like I defer on what it is. I'm not even saying I agree with them. I just don't know enough about what their reasoning was to rule on that. Here's what I will say. We were told that the reason the ATF didn't violate the Second Amendment is that it has nothing to do with owning a firearm. It's just about distributing the firearm. We're not saying you can't have it per se. We're just saying you can't sell one. You can't give one away. You can't, pass it from this owner to this owner, or manufacture it for sale until you get our permission and pay us the tax stamp and all of that and register it and so forth to be able to do so. Well, that would mean that if you made your own gun, then the ATF shouldn't be involved at all. So now what they're saying is, no, you can't do that either. So there's, it's garbage, right? Like it goes well beyond their mandate, which the mandate itself is unconstitutional. And frankly, I believe, and it's going to take forever because you got to get it through the court system or whatever. The Bruin decision that happened last year laid the groundwork for ending all gun control. Because if you read it, it's very clear. They said unless you can show a historical analog of a gun law being a firearms or weapons law being enforced prior to the writing of the Second Amendment, then you can't come up with that after the fact. And the reality is the only historical analogs that they have are enforcements against Black people and natives and immigrants owning firearms. So the only thing that the government could point at is saying, well, yeah, when we made it easier to lynch slaves or massacre and genocide natives or lynch Italian people. And so they don't have a good leg to stand on with any of this stuff. And none of those are good historical analogs for telling someone you can't make your own weapon, because there is nothing for that. There's nothing that says you can't make your own weapon. They can try to say, oh, well, making your own weapon and selling it or whatever. But again, there's none of that either. In fact, the colonists and the original, the well-regulated militia that we're always told about, that's referenced in the Second Amendment in the preamble, they were making their own stuff. They didn't go to Gun Inc. There wasn't a cult factory. They were making their own stuff for the most part. Or there might be a small manufacturer who'd make weapons for that area or whatever. But it was mostly homemade and small batch made firearms. They didn't have giant factories making firearms. And so, historically, it's just the opposite. This is how people got guns. And no, they weren't serialized. So I trust or hope that Firearms Policy Coalition will continue to push it all the way up to the Supreme Court, where it ultimately gets struck down. But here's the fun thing about 3D printing, guys. As 3D printing gets more prolific and less expensive and more advanced, soon it's not going to matter what they say. I mean, they could arrest you if they find you with it or whatever, but in terms of making it and having it, it's not, all they can do is enforce after the fact. and it's not going to matter what they say. It's about as effective to tell someone you can't own a illegal firearm that we haven't given you permission to own. That's about as effective as telling them you can't own an illegal bag of weed. Well, soon it's going to be as effective as telling you that you can't make a paper airplane. Like it's going to soon not matter. Like they can say you can't do whatever. And as 3D manufacturing, both in the design and the actual hardware and the materials, get more and more and more and more and more advanced, you're going to end up reaching a point where people are open source designing and distributing designs for small arms that are better than the stuff that are being made by the manufacturers. And it's happening on a more dynamic basis, because unlike the manufacturers who are having to work within the guidelines of government contracts and regulations and all of that stuff, you'll be able to make whatever the hell you want. And you'll be limited only by your own imagination. And you'll be able to open source, send it out, and let people beta test it so that you're not waiting for some regulatory authority to say it's safe or whatever. We're going to be 10, 20, 30 years ahead in small arms. We're going to be making stuff that they can't even imagine. And eventually we're going to be able to, 3D print the ammunition as well. Like it's reaching a point where we're going to be ahead of the curve on them. That the people that say, I don't care what the rules are going to be ahead of the curve. It's going to be the smaller, it's going to be Raytheon or I guess Colt or Beretta or Glock or whoever. They're going to be the ones playing catch up, and they're going to fall further and further and further behind. So between that and the work that groups like FPC, Firearms Policy Coalition, and is doing in the courts, and that GOA, Gun Owners of America, and National Association for Gun Rights, and groups like that are doing on the political front, and groups like Black Guns Matter and other groups like that are doing on the cultural front, I think gun control's on the ropes. I think it's going to be it took a long time for us to get where we've been, and it's going to take a long time for us to get back, and they're going to fight, and it's going to be an ebb and flow, but I think we're headed in the right direction. I think that we are headed in the direction of it doesn't matter. I don't care. You're not stacking up. Okay, well then I don't care what your opinion is.
Right. First thing, definitely don't go to the link in the comment that I just put up.
Absolutely not. Do not do that.
Definitely do not go to that link. And it definitely doesn't tell you
whatever
how to do
you do.
everything.
Don't go to that. No. And whatever you do, if they have like a CAD file or whatever it is, don't download that.
Yeah, don't download it.
Please.
You could, and yeah. They do come and scare you though. Spike, I have a quick little story for you because I know we're getting close to the end of time here. I did have the FBI come to my house a few months ago. They came with about a dozen printed out tweets of mine, not just original tweets, but retweets and likes. And one of them was the in process of a 3D printed AR-15 lower, the U-Bar 1.0, if you're wondering, but there's now a 2.0, so definitely don't look up.
See what I'm saying?
U-Bar
it's already
2.0.
like it's already obsolete. What you said, what they were coming to talk to you about, it's already obsolete.
Right. So I mean, and they will threaten you. They will, right? And they're going to threaten somebody who's like me, right? I own my home, I have a wife, I have a kid, I have a job, and they're more likely to come to your house and threaten you, because I'll tell you what, it was pretty fucking scary. And I don't want to poke that bear too much again, right? Because next time they may not be so nice and just knock on the door. So there is that risk, but it's like, okay, where is your line in the sand, right? When they come past that line, then you're no, this isn't happening. I guess fortunate for me in that situation, kind of, it sounds bad, but my First Amendment rights on the interwebs, and them coming and talking to me and threatening me, and my inability to manufacture firearms at home, isn't the line for me, right? That you got to have your line. You got to figure out what's worth it, because shit can go bad really quick with these people, right? Oh, yeah. You got to think they're an armed gang. They have violent mentalities, and they will, take you out without a second thought. They don't care that you're a fellow American citizen. They do not care. They will take you out.
No, they don't care.
No. So Yeah, so that's my my TED talk for the day. My lessons from Uncle Brian, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and I'd like to piggyback off of that. I'm glad you shared that because I want to give some like stay safe out there, folks, type of talk about this. First of all, if someone comes to your if police, federal agent, whatever comes to your house, you know, we got the shut the fuck up Friday template to go from. By the way, is it okay to cuss on this show? I probably should
Yeah,
ask.
yes, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
all right. I've been dropping a couple. I'm not too bad, but you know, we got shut the gosh diggity up Friday stuff. Basic things. I don't answer questions. I don't consent to searches without a warrant. And I have a right to remain silent. Have a great day. Boom. If you're in your home, you can close the door and you can, whatever.
Yeah.
So right there. But here's some like common guidance that I'm seeing a lot of, especially younger people, that they're not getting when they're on social media. You have the right to share your freedom of speech. You do not have the right to make actual threats of violence. And I'm not even talking about, you know, First Amendment standards. I'm just saying, like, if you're saying I'm going to kill X person or whatever, you're crossing a boundary that is, you know, that and especially if you're not actually going to do it, all you're doing is setting yourself up to get in trouble. Here's the other thing I will say. There's a lot of feds and informants out there. And so every day is, yeah, it's every day is it's shut the fuck up whatever day it is. So today it would be Tuesday. But like if you're on the internet especially, but if you're in a gun group, you're even in person and someone is just talking a lot about, you know, it's time for the great boog and it's time for us to start dropping bodies and we need to talk about rounding up, you know, ex politician or ex governor or ex whatever. Yeah, just assume they're either a fed, an idiot, or both. And if you find yourself being one of the people saying those things, stop. Stop. You can, like, even if you want to argue that you have a right to say it a certain way, here's what I'm telling you. There's also like situational awareness, and the situation is they're looking to set you up with shit like that. And you know, you look at this not monstrosity with the Gretchen Whitmer case, where they basically had a bunch of edgy gun bros on a Zoom chat and had a bunch of feds in there and criminal informants going, yeah, we need to do this. We're gonna round her up and we're gonna kidnap her and we're gonna do. And then like the other ones were like, yeah, and then they got arrested and they got tried and were successful. Most of them were successfully prosecuted for that. So like, be safe out there, guys. Like, it's understand that they are looking to set you up, and they have people amongst us in these groups and on X, on Twitter, on X, and on Facebook and everywhere else. Like, they're on all the social media, and they're on Rumble, they're on Gab if you're on that, or they're on Telegram. Like, they aren't just on the big tech ones; they're everywhere. They're on 4chan, 8chan, whatever we're up to now.
They're
12chan.
on
Like,
they're definitely on Signal. Just FYI.
oh, they're on Signal. They're on your WhatsApp group. Like they're everywhere. They're all over. And it's not just like federal informants and cops. It's also like or federal agents and cops. It's also informants. It's people
Yeah.
that have a charge. It might be your friend
Yeah, it really will. It
who's
could be.
got a charge. I remember there was a guy that was very prominent in 2020, and he was having to set people up left and right because otherwise they were going to put him away. Like
Yep.
Don't become that person, and be aware that your buddy could be trying to get out of a 20, 30-year jail sentence. And, you know, there are many, many gray eps amongst us, right? There are an endless number of them. And the thing is, like, they're gonna come in heavy, and then you're gonna decide whether to give up or to, you know, try to fight back knowing you're gonna lose, right? And then whichever happens, the media is just gonna say you were a violent extremist and that, you know, you were a danger to the community, and now your loved ones who, you know, are mourning your loss are gonna hear nothing about how dangerous you were, and everyone else in the community is gonna be glad you were gone because they've been fully propagandized and conditioned.
Yeah.
Or we could not do that stuff and continue to do the work that we're doing to normalize gun use and to work and fight it in the courts and to fight it in the court of public opinion and to, you know, quietly, safely, and if you choose to ignore the stuff, do so in a way that's smart and has a good amount of awareness of the situation. That's how we're going to get out of this. We're not going to get out of this by being so edgy that we set off red flags left and right, literal red flags.
Yeah. Have the feds ever come to you, Spike? Knock on wood. You don't have to answer, and knock on wood
Thanks
if you
for having
do.
me on.
All right. So we're coming up. We're over an hour. So let me just ask you one last two more questions. All right. Are you going to run for president?
I haven't decided that yet. I'm not ruling it out. It is a decision that I'll be making sooner than later. I'm doing a tremendous amount of work with You Are the Power. Next Tuesday, I'm going to be in Columbia, South Carolina, speaking to a city council there. Last week, I was in Taylorsville, Mississippi, while my activists were in Columbia, South Carolina. We're doing stuff across the country. We just opened a chapter in Australia. We're working on some in other countries as well. So I'm doing a lot of work. I'm doing everything I can for the liberty movement. The question becomes, how do I best serve this movement, and how do I best bring people into an intuitive understanding and adoption of our ideas and principles and get them to act upon them, not just believe them and say they believe it, but to actually act upon those principles. And so far, I've been doing that with You Are the Power. The question that I have to answer is running for president going to be a better use of my time to grow the liberty movement between, say, now or the end of this year and November, and then moving forward from there, having done that? Is that going to be the best use of my time, or should I stay in the lane that I'm in right now and support whoever it is that gets the libertarian nomination? Or if someone in another party is even more libertarian, support them, whatever, support anyone who's saying liberty stuff that's running for any office, and stay where I am. And I honestly am not sure yet what the answer is there. And I will say that running for office has never been something I've craved to do. I'm not worried about the ego boost or ego stroke from it. I'm not, trying to pad my LinkedIn. It's not that's never been, even when I ran for the VP nomination, I didn't even initially think I was going to get it. And then once I did get it, I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to do everything I can with this. But that wasn't ever like, man, I really want to run for vice president. It was just an opportunity that came up. So if I do decide to do it, it will be because I think that's where I can best be used in this movement. And if I don't, it's because I either think that I can best be used where I am now, or that there's someone better positioned to use that role to grow the liberty movement. But whatever I end up doing, I'm not going anywhere. We are, as always, just getting started, and I will support this movement in every way that I can, in whatever capacity I can.
There you have it. I would love for you to run, but it's your choice, and I'm sure your wife has a little bit of a say in it as well.
That's another one. Like, listen, if I decide all that stuff, and Tasha says no, it's like, all right, well then I guess we're not doing this then. Like, you got to have your family on board, or
yeah, absolutely.
It's not going to work out. But I will. I haven't, like I said, I haven't ruled it out. But I also haven't ruled it in. So we will see.
That's fair. Speaking of your wife, me and my wife met your wife at Liberty Speaks in Eastern Shore of Maryland last year. You actually went to that Assange thing. So we were talking to Tasha for a while, and my wife was very reassured that she is a normal person who's married to a crazy libertarian, just as your wife is. So
yes, and she's real. She's not like a photoshopped, a Photoshop thing that no one, because she doesn't have social media, because she doesn't, she doesn't really like social media. So she doesn't have a social media. So it kind of looks like I've got a long-term contract with some like runway model, and that some reason no one's ever heard of. But no, she's my actual wife. Like, she's at the home right now. Like, she's a real person. By the way, before I go, JO number 2.
Yes.
Holy crap.
Changed your life, didn't it?
It's night and day. So for those who don't know what I'm talking about, I'm from Baltimore. Like I was born in Baltimore, but we fled. We were refugees from Baltimore when I was born in Mount Sinai. Like I was from Baltimore. I'm not like one of these people who's like, yeah, I'm from Baltimore and I'm actually, like an hour away. Like we were in Baltimore. And then when we left, when I was 5 years old, we came down to Myrtle Beach, and but we still, it's not a crab unless unless it's like Maryland style crabs and so forth. And so I'm talking with Brian when I was up there 2 years ago, and I think it was like right before I left, and I'm like, yeah, if it doesn't have Old Bay on it, I'm not even interested in the crab. And he's like, Old Bay, and I'm like, yeah, Old Bay, and he's like, what are you, a tourist? And I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I a refugee who's expat who's come back to see my former war-torn land to see how it's doing. Yeah, I'm not really from here. And he's like, that's not Maryland. What are you talking about? And so he tells me about JO number 2. So I'm like, all right, fine. And I think we even tried to stop somewhere to find it, but we couldn't or something. And so I got it online, and not even like I threw out my Old Bay. It's not even comparable. It's not even. I now feel like instead of having like, it would be like comparing like, real Vermont maple syrup to like, the Waffle House sugar water taste. Like it's not even, it still tastes good, right? But it's nothing compared to the real thing. And that's there is no. I mean, Old Bay will do in a pinch, I guess, but there's no, when you have the option, there's no reason to subject yourself to that when you've got JO number 2.
Yeah, that was funny. We were talking about that, and then I get home and I'm just scrolling Facebook, and the JO page like just popped up. I mean, it was listening.
Oh yeah, no, they're listening. Right? Yeah, no, they're
so
listening.
Then I commented, Spike, they're listening to us, and you I can't remember what you said, but your comment got more, like 1,000 times more likes. It was like, it was like 150 likes, and like the most JO Spice post ever got was like, double digits if they're lucky. And I was like, that was perfect.
No, I made JO go viral. I was happy to do that. And then, since I've had it, it's like, oh my Lord, like
life changing.
It's you don't want to not eat crabs. Like you literally just want to have, and it's specifically number 2. I think number 1, I haven't had that, but I think that's more of like a general seasoning for seafood.
Yeah, it's smaller salt. It's like fine salt as opposed to like the rock salt. And,
Number 2, it's not even like whatever if you're watching this and you're like, Maryland style crab legs with Old Bay and whatever, fine, okay, yes. Imagine that's your baseline, okay? JO number 2 takes it to the flavor, the depth of the different flavor notes, the intensity of the flavor. It's like it's literally comparing real. That's the best thing I can come up with. Real maple syrup to like it is Butterworth sugar water crap. Like it's just not. It's not comparable. It's not comparable.
Speaking of crabs, not going to put you in a spot or anything, but we're having our crab feast next month.
If we can make it work, we will. I know that my next month or 2 is pretty packed, but if we can make it work, we will. No promises, but you saw me throw down with some crabs, so you
didn't look up.
If I am coming, bring a lot more than you were expecting to.
All right, man. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and spending a little over an hour with me.
Man.
I look forward to your potential announcement. I really do, for the presidential run. But if you don't, I completely 100% understand. We finally got, in my opinion, a good candidate who's running for the Libertarian nomination for president. So if you don't run, at least I got a guy that I feel confident in. So Spike, with that, anything else you got? You are the power. You are you, and trolling the ATF, and you got my local police department to turn off comments permanently on Facebook. So, and it actually turned into a statewide thing where now the state police don't allow comments now and everything. So I think you trolled them one time, really, really good, and they're like, "Nah, fuck this. We're turning off comments." So
no, we can't. We only no more than once. We can't survive another one of those. No. Yeah. So thanks for having me on, man. And thank you all for tuning in. If you haven't already, I am Spike Cohen on all social media. Whatever you use, I've just about anything you use, I'm on it. And same, yeah, no, that's how I feel about that as well. Thank you, Scott, and thank you for kind of co-hosting as much as you could by text. But I'm on all social media. If you look for Spike Cohen, you'll find me. You Are the Power we are on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. X. We're on X. And we're looking to expand our social media presence. We're also on Discord for the members. I'd love for you to be a part of You Are the Power. If you're not already, go to youarethepower.net. If you're able to become a member, we'd love to have you. Membership is free. If you are able to give to help spread the word and help cover the cost of growing the Liberty movement, youarethepower.net/donate. It's all right there. We'd love to have you be a part of it. My website is spikecohen.com. You can keep up with any of my upcoming events and things like that there. And if you ever get lost and can't find me, then just go to the ATF Facebook page, unless you're Brian and you can't get on Facebook anymore. And or really the ATF X account. And if you look for their most recent post, and there you will likely find me. That is our North Star if you get lost.
Well, Spike, thank you for coming on. If you like the show, if you like me doing this, give us a follow, subscribe on Twitter. X. On X, subscribe on YouTube, hit the bell. You will no longer find us on Facebook because, as Spike alluded to, I went through my 13th Zuckening, and I think 13th is my magic number, and I am done with Facebook. Yeah, so it's a good number to stop at. So again, thank you everybody for listening, watching, and Spike for coming on. Everybody have a good night, and I'll see you next week.